Te tiki te mai te kākā kūkū mai te kuhupā kōkō mai ko te manu tuia. A tuia i runga, tuia i raro, tuia i waho, tuia i roto. A tuia i te here tangata ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. A tuia i te muka tangata i tāke a mai i Hawaiki nui, Hawaiki rua, Hawaiki pāmāmao. Ki te whai ao, ki te ao marama, a tihei Māori ora. Koutou e tāringa whakarongo mai ana, koutou e karu mātakitaki mai ana. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou i tēnei wā. E whakarongo mai nei kia mātou i tēnei wā. E pāna ki te take o te PHO Fund. Anei mātou, te poari, nā kai kōrero mō tēnei wā. E mihi atu nei kia koutou. Hoi anō nau mai piki mai i Wainganui o tātou i tēnei wā. Mēnā he pātai tā koutou, kōrero mai. Mēnā he whakaaro tā koutou, a whakaaro mai. Hoi anō koutou, piki mai, kake mai ki tēnei whakaaturanga e kia nei ko te aho tāhuhu. Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou. Huri noa o te motu. Tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora tātou, and my name is Mark Ormsby, and it's my privilege and honour to welcome you here to the first webinar series, the first of 10, that's been hosted by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and Te Matapihi. The name of our series is Te Aho Tāhuhu, and today we have a panel of speakers that are going to talk about the PHO Fund. Hoi anō tātou, we've got 3 speakers here today. Our first speaker here is Chris Glaudel, who's from the Community Housing Aotearoa, Ngā Whariro o Aotearoa. After that, we'll have Debbie Bean, who's the lead for the Te Ao Taketake pathway, the Māori pathway in the PHO Fund at Te Tuapapa Kura Kāinga, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. And we're going to round it off with Alan Thorpe, who's the Group CE for the Habitat for Humanity. Hoi anō tātou. I will now pass it over to Chris Glaudel. Tēnā koe, Chris. Kōrero mai.
Thank you very much, Mike. Kia ora e te whānau. Ko Chris Glaudel toko ingoa. Chris Glaudel here, the Deputy Chief Executive at Community Housing Aotearoa, and I'd really like to give a big thank you to the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and Te Matapihi for pulling these sessions together. This is a new area in the in terms of providing new opportunities, and we're quite pleased to have this initiative in place now. The progressive home ownership is something that providers have been offering within New Zealand for decades now, but isn't real well known. And it's the first government investment in the 10 years since 2014. So we really see this as a new opening, and the investment framework that sets out the priority groups of Maori, Pacific, and households with children are spot on in terms of responding to those that are most disadvantaged in home ownership right now. And we know that that's extremely important because becoming a homeowner in New Zealand is really the way to secure intergenerational wealth and to lift people out of poverty and out of insecure housing and that uncertainty that comes in a housing market like we currently experience of rising home prices, rising rents, and difficulty of securing warm, safe, and dry homes. And with the assistance of working with an iwi Māori provider or a community housing provider through a shared equity, a rent-to-buy, a leasehold arrangement, it really gives that new opportunity to become homeowners. And we see the program overall as being very important to establish a new tenure and to really make these types of progressive home ownership tenures as common as renting or as common as traditional home ownership. And we think with the $400 million the government has committed to get this started, with its allocation into directly into iwi and Māori organizations to help whānau, into community organizations to continue the work that they have done, and through the direct pathway, that it will be broad enough that people will recognize this new form of tenure, and it'll be as common as anything else in the market. And we really hope that this is something that over time does become permanent, that government will reinvest through future budget allocations, and for decades to come, we'll be able to provide new opportunities. So with that, there are a few organizational considerations. One of the things that really is important for you all that are here representing organizations is to think about and to prepare yourselves for how you can deliver if you haven't done so in the past. And I think one of the primary things to keep in mind is that the provider is the entity responsible for repayment to HUD. It's a 15-year time period, and the terms are very generous from the government in making these happen. But at the end of the day, your organization is the one that has signed the agreement with the government, and your organization is the one with the obligation to repay. Now, the households are there. They will be making their payments, and hopefully over the 15 years will be well on their pathway and successfully graduated into full ownership. But it is something to keep in mind that the legal responsibility rests with the organization, and people will not be going after individual whānau for those loans, but looking to you all to make the funding work and to really be able to bring on the new supply. Debbie's going to go over the variety of funding options that are available. And through the process of working with Tamata Pihi and Cha and providers, the ministry put in place a number of very good options in different ways to assist organizations to be able to secure the land, to build the homes and complete those. But even with those, your cash is still going to be required. So the money doesn't all come in up front, and you will still need to have the financial resources to undertake the real estate development and to complete the homes. The other thing to keep in mind is often we think about, okay, we've built that home, whānau's moved in, we're done and we can relax now. But it's not the case in the progressive home ownership, because the relationship between the organization and the whānau is a long-term one. People's lives don't go on a straight path at all times, and you'll be walking alongside that household on their journey to full home ownership. And that can take up to 15 years. And so when you come into this, it's really important that your organization is geared up and understands the responsibilities aren't just through the build phase, but extend far beyond that and working with the households over time. And then a few practical considerations in addition to the organizational considerations to keep in mind. In terms of starting, if you haven't provided progressive home ownership in the past, is to really read and understand the investment framework, the due diligence criteria, the funding process, and the reporting requirements in advance. It's important to understand those things so that you're going down the right path from the beginning, and rather than going out and starting to look for a home and talking to some whānau about whether they're interested, is really understand what are those requirements. It is a contracting process with government, and at the end of the day, requirements need to be met, and Debbie will be discussing those in a bit more detail. But the information is there. And so that's the great thing. It's on the website. Mark, Debbie, and the team at HUD are all familiar with this. They're available to answer questions. And in addition, Tamata Pihi, Community Housing Aotearoa, and other providers are also available to help and assist. Another thing that we know is that preparing whānau for progressive home ownership can take some time, and it's important to start working with them early. So after you understand the program clearly, again, get out and start talking with whānau, understand who is interested, where they are, what their concerns are. It is a tenure that's not as well known, and so it often takes a number of meetings and discussions for them to really become comfortable with the concept of sharing ownership with someone else. And the earlier you start those conversations, the sooner you'll have a group of whānau who are ready to take that step forward and who are prepared both financially, but also more emotionally, that they're comfortable going into this type of arrangement. And the last bit of advice on practical considerations is, don't reinvent the wheel. Use the support that's out there. One of the things that we know is that financial institutions are very risk averse. They like to work with things that are tried and true. And so they really want to have a standard product that they work with. And so don't start writing up your own shared ownership agreement. Kāinga Ora has developed one that's available for use. Other providers are also willing to make their agreements available. And so by starting with what's already known, it helps you move through the process faster. It ensures that you will be able to get those banking approvals that are going to be required to be able to finalize your contract with HUD, and that you're using a product that is known and tested and is mindful of both the risks for the organization and for the whānau who are the shared owners. And so use that support, use what's tried and true, and move on from there. The key takeaways, I guess, for Community Housing Aotearoa, we really look at the 4-year funding commitment to $400 million as a great opportunity, and we want to see this succeed, and we want it to be made permanent. The second takeaway is really remembering building the home is the easy part of this whole process. And for those of you that have built homes before, you know that's not easy. So really make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into, and focus on the long term and not just the house construction. And then finally, both Community Housing Aotearoa and the KiwiBuy providers that came together just going on 3 years ago to advocate for this type of program are available to share the learnings that we've had from working in this space over time. Kia ora.
O tēnā koe, Chris. That was Chris Glaudel from Community Housing Aotearoa, Ngā Wharirau o Aotearoa. Hoi anō tātou, we're going to move on, and I'm going to just start. We're going to go next to our next speaker, Debbie Bean, who's the lead for the Te Ao Take Take Māori pathway at HUD. And just before introducing her, I want to just say that yes, what Chris has said is the government has set aside funding of $400 million for the Progressive Home Ownership Fund over the next 3 years. The funding is equally allocated across 3 progressive pathways. The first pathway is Te Ao Take Take, which Deb will be talking about. The provider pathway is also, which works, both those pathways work through providers active in the housing system. And of course, there's the First Home Partner, which has just been released in October by Kāinga Ora. Both the Te Ao Take Take and provider pathways are administered in the form of a loan to the provider, which is required to be repaid at year 15 following a drawdown. There is 0 interest on the loan for 15 years, but the provider must be able to offer security for the loan, and the provider is also responsible to pay back that loan. Like Chris said, the priority groups for PHO are Māori, Pacific peoples, and households with children. This loan targets first homeowners who are earning no more than $130,000 per annum, and that's slightly a little bit more for multi-generational households. But we'll leave that up to Deb to get into the detail here. Hoi anō tātou. Tēnā koe, Deb. I will now pass it over to you.
Tēnā koe, Mark. Debbie Bean speaking. Ko Debbie Bean tōku ingoa no Ngāpuhi, ara hokianga whakapau karakia. Welcome to this morning. I've seen lots of names and lots of whānau names that have popped up in the chat, so lovely to have you on board this morning. Just a little bit about me to start. I did start my career in housing with the Old Housing Corporation, and I've worked in different roles since then. The last 12 years with Te Puni Kōkiri in the Māori Housing Network, working in Taitokoro, and before that working in the establishment of Whānau Ora. I came to Tuapapa Kāinga in July into this role as the lead for the Progressive Home Ownership Te Ao Take Take pathway. And it is a real privilege to be in this role. It is one of the things when you're working in the Māori housing system and you understand some of the needs and some of the machinery that we have to work with. I saw this position and the opportunity in progressive home ownership to really make a difference for our whānau. So that drew me into the role, and I really am really pleased to share with you some of the a few slides that we've put together that will just take you through the process to become involved as a Te Ao Take Take progressive home ownership provider, or as a provider on our provider pathway. So you might might be wondering what the difference between the two pathways is. The Te Ao Take Take pathway operates by open invitation. It specifically works with Māori providers that are working with whānau in the housing space. And by open invitation, this means that we don't work to funding rounds. We will work with you on your invitation to participate and your delivery plan as you need us to, and as you're ready to work through some of the process that's required here. The provider pathway, we have a number of providers that have a lot of experience in progressive home ownership. So this pathway applies to those providers. And saying that, there are new providers that will come into this pathway also. And as Chris mentioned, they will generally use a lot of the learnings that have been taken over the last 15 to 20 years in Aotearoa. So with the progressive home ownership, the invitation to participate comes in two parts. The first part is becoming an approved PHO provider. The second part is submitting your delivery plan. Now, we have a suite of documents available on our website, and the address is there. And it very importantly, it includes a information guidance document for you to help you to complete the invitation to participate. So Rōpū can choose to become an approved provider first. That might be the first step, and then they may work on the delivery plan and submit that later on, and that's entirely acceptable. Right, so the first part, to become an approved PHO provider, just like a number of funding applications, or when you're applying for government funding, you have to show us and provide evidence that you have sound financial practice, that you have good governance practice, that you have good organisational processes, and more importantly for this particular program, that you have a designed PHO product. You must also show us that you have financial institutions that will work with the PHO product that you are offering, and you have the ability to connect and work with our whānau and the households that you are targeting. Submitting your delivery plan. So this is where we get into the nuts and bolts of the actual the house or the development that you are working with and that you require funding for. We want to know in this part of the application the location of the dwellings, the number of dwellings that you will create, the estimated uptake of your PHO product in these locations by the people in the priority groups, the amount of funding you require, the estimated delivery timeframe, the drawdown milestones, and the security that you will be offering for the progressive home ownership loan itself. Receiving funding. So the amount of PHO funding depends on the progressive home ownership product that you are offering. So you'll see here on the left-hand side that if you are using a shared equity arrangement or product, the fund contribution, the Progressive Home Ownership Fund contribution, will cover a maximum of 45% of the cost to the household of purchasing the home. So that part there is quite important. So the loan will be based on the cost to the household. Where it's a rent to buy or a leasehold arrangement, the fund contribution is capped at 50%. And important in this part, providers must be able to show when the whānau and the households would graduate from the progressive home ownership part of the scheme, and that they can, that being the progressive home ownership provider, can repay the loan at year 15. You'll see there in the table on the right-hand side, we have different options depending on the product type, and we have some drawdown milestones there. So if you go into an arrangement, this is around the actual build of the houses I'm talking now, for a turnkey arrangement with a developer, you'll see 10% on signing of the acquisition contract, 90% on completion. Option 2, the provider already owns the land and is arranging for the homes to be built. That's 50% on lockup and 50% on completion. Option 3 is where the provider needs to buy the land and will then arrange for the homes to be built. The drawdown milestones here are 30% on settlement of the acquisition of the qualifying PHO development land, 30% on lockup, 40% on completion. And option 4 is where the provider only requires the PHO funding once the home is completed and the partner household is ready to move in, and that's 100% on completion. Right, now for all of this, if you become a progressive home ownership provider, we do have some grant funding available to the provider to support the work that they are doing to prepare the households for this journey, for this home ownership journey, before they go into the home, and again some occupancy support so that they can be successful in that first 15-year period where the PHO loan may be in use. So for pre-occupancy support, that is a maximum of $7,000 per household, and that we know, and I'm sure that Alan, who's going to follow this, will talk to you about the work that goes on beforehand in selecting and preparing our whānau to take up this journey. The occupancy support is to support the whānau achieve full home ownership, some pastoral care, and there might be some, something like maintenance planning or some home inspections to ensure that the home is being well kept, at least especially in a shared equity arrangement. And that is up to $1,800 per year per household. So the key takeaways that we have here, the price points are based on affordability for the household. Housing outgoings must be less than 30% of income, and the incomes are capped at $130,000 per annum per household. There is a different formula for multi-generational households that might lift that income cap slightly. The PHO product and model, as we've mentioned a couple of times, must demonstrate that the whānau or the household will graduate in time for the PHO loan to be repaid in 15 years. There is a strong preference for new builds. There are exceptions though, and we will work with you on those. But the key criteria here is that they are in locations where there are no new developments occurring within the next 12 months. The immediate readiness of whānau to participate in progressive home ownership, and where a wait would prevent or hinder the whānau opportunity to move into home ownership. So we have a couple of exceptions there, and like I said, we're quite willing to work with you and to consider what the needs are of the whānau that you're working with and the homes that you have available in your region that would be suitable for whānau to take on in home ownership. And finally, because I've gone through that fairly quickly, the contact details for our team here at Te Tuapapa Kura Kāinga. If you require the documentation that I mentioned at the start, the first email address is the one to send your request to. And then the next 5 names that we have here, Nigel Hewitson, myself, Mark Ormsby, Tracy Jacobs and Lee Wright, we make up the team for the progressive home ownership here at Te Tuapapa Kura Kāinga. It's been really lovely. I know that was a very quick overview, and we have been reaching out to people, and we're happy for people to reach into us to increase housing in your region. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Debbie Bean. Thank you for that. We've got a few questions, Debbie, from the whānau out there. First question, one of the questions was, how many whānau will be helped into home ownership through this fund? Our modelling says around 1,600 to 4,000 individuals. But there's also other questions too, and I'll just run through some of those. When someone raised, when you're talking about financial institutions, are you talking about banks?
Yes, we are. First tier lenders, banks.
Yeah. Will the PHO fund work with Papakainga development, or is it a separate product altogether requiring security over land?
So we have a few different options for security. We would like progressive home ownership, and our intention is definitely for progressive home ownership to be available on whenua Māori for Papakainga development. We haven't quite struck a model yet, but we have a number of iwi and whānau entities that are looking at that right now. So we all know that security over whenua Māori is the dilemma at the moment. So we have some policy work, as well as some work, like I say, with some iwi and whānau trusts that are we're trying to find a workaround, what the workaround is and what the policy is that we can make stick for whenua Māori.
Another question here from Lisa. Can Māori chips choose either the provider pathway or te au take?
Yes, they can. A Māori provider can choose which pathway they would like to enter. I would like to think you'd like to come into the te au take pathway, but it is your choice.
And just around being an approved provider, Deb, could you shed some light on those that are, I guess, have CHIP status and those that don't have CHIP status? What is the likely time frame to become an approved provider through PHO?
If we're talking just to become an approved provider, from the time, I'll go back to the first part of that question. If you are already an approved community housing provider and you have community housing provider status, the process will be slightly quicker to come into Te Ao Taketake as an approved provider, or just as an approved provider. The process to become an approved provider would take, provided we have all the documentation that we require, we should be able to confirm that approval within 6 weeks from receiving the documentation.
Hoi anō tātou, we're going to move on to Ellen Thorpe, who's the Group CE for Habitat for Humanity, to give us a provider perspective of how the PHO Fund has been working. Tēnā koe, Ellen.
Kia ora, Mark, and kia ora koutou. It's a wonderful privilege to be on this webinar today, and I'm so excited that the $400 million fund is wanting to get out there, and for progressive home ownership to become something that's part of a New Zealand society and fabric, because we all know that home ownership is so important. So I guess that you're on this webinar because you actually want to help people into home ownership. You'll see there that I've got, there's a group of people in the middle, but there's a bunch of questions there about how do we actually finance this. Ultimately, our goal is to help families and whānau into homes. And the critical piece here is that it's not just about good intentions, but actually each organisation has to have an ability to prove to MHUD that it can actually go through the process of due diligence. So the critical piece down the bottom there, which I've got on the slide, is that you need to demonstrate to your funders that your organisation and your proposed product is sustainable. And it's not just for your organisation, but also for the families that you put into those homes. And you need to be able to demonstrate that in the long term. If we need to have 50% of the funding that's coming from MHUD, then you've got to find that other funding from somewhere else. That could be commercial finance, it could be finance from your own organisation, and the 50% doesn't also mean that you can actually, you will have to actually put some equity from your own organisation into this process. So Habitat for Humanity has been operating for 30 years. It's delivered about 550 whānau into home ownership. And through our process with MHUD, we sort of crystallised what we have done in the last 30 years. And we believe that there are 5 components to progressive home ownership. And that first component there is the pre-selection. Selecting our families is probably the most critical success factor. If you select the wrong family, then the whole process is going to be very difficult to actually complete and succeed. So we select families not based on their current circumstances, but actually on their future potential and their willingness to partner with us. So that's a really important piece, is that somehow you've got to be able to select people who are ready and are financially ready and able, but they can't accumulate a deposit. They can't access the housing system as it currently stands. They do need some help to do that, but they have a motivation and a desire to enter into home ownership. And so this is why through that process and designing this fund with MHUD actually recognised this and has put $7,000 per family into the pre-selection phase. So as Habitat for Humanity, we totally think this is so important, because actually once the choice of the partner is actually so critical to the overall success of the program. The next component there is our support services. And again, MHUD, as Debbie has put up on the slide, are offering $1,800 per year per family for that support services. And that's small, but it's a recognition that actually it's not just about a transaction that's one-off in time. This is actually a process. That's $1,800 for 15 years. And it means that as an organisation, we can offer pastoral support. And as we know, we all go through ups and downs in our life, and we have difficulties. We need people to come along and walk alongside us. And so as an organisation, MHUD will give you that funding to walk alongside your partner families. And we think that is so critical. The third component that we believe is part of progressive home ownership is having stable tenure and giving people the ability. So we know stability actually produces significant results. People are more likely to retain their jobs. The children are more likely to be educated. People are embedded in their communities, and their overall wellness is so much more significant when they actually have an ability to stay in the same place. The fourth component there of progressive home ownership is a subsidy, and that's why we're so glad the government has come up and suggested actually that they could fund 50% of the capital cost as a loan. So the subsidy here is not being given 50% of the capital cost, but it's actually being loaned that amount. And that's quite a significant piece, because what it means is that we can then pass that on to our families. So our families effectively only need to be able to support the mortgage on half the capital cost of a home. And we will partner them through that process. So the subsidy is really important. And then finally, a well-priced house. Habitat uses well-priced homes, and not elaborate homes, but obviously they need to be healthy and fit and sufficiently for the families to actually be housed adequately. And one of the things which we're just exploring right now is actually working with the KiwiBuild homes that are already built. They're at a certain price point, they meet a certain standard, and actually they can be delivered into this PHO program. Those are the key components. We know that subsidy is really important because house prices are so large, 11 times average income here in Auckland. We've got 2-bedroom apartment units in Manuera that are selling for $600,000. That's a huge price. So if you're able to get 50% capital loan from the government, then that effectively takes it down to $300,000. And that means that our fortnightly rent for that particular family needs to be able to cover the cost of our financing as Habitat for Humanity. And so we can pass on that subsidy to the families and actually do what this fund is meant to do, which is to prioritise Māori and Pacific peoples and also children, families and children. I won't go into detail onto this. There's going to be another session on the details of the Habitat for Humanity product, but effectively our product has been a 10-year life cycle. We enter into a tenancy agreement with our families, but we have an overall agreement where our families are given what they need to do to partner with us and to prove that partnership over time. And at a certain point, we'll offer them a sale and purchase agreement. That sale and purchase agreement is not settled immediately. It's settled at the end of 10 years or 15 years, as long as it takes for them to do that. And effectively, they move from becoming a renter to an owner in possession, but we don't transfer title to them. So at the end of that process, their income's gone up. They've been able to accumulate a deposit. Then they are able to go out to a commercial bank and refinance and then pay Habitat back the money. And then Habitat pays back the government, the PHO fund, and then we pay back our commercial providers the other 50%. So that's effectively, that's just a very quick overview of our product. And I suppose the key takeaways here for everybody that's on the call for the final slide is that don't reinvent a product. We've had that. Chris has already said that. I think Debbie said that as well. Don't reinvent a product. There's some good proven products out there from Housing Foundation and Shared Equity. We've got Queenstown Lakes with leasehold, and we've got Habitat for Humanity, which is a rent to own product. We've got the documentation around that. We've had lawyers go over it multiple times. It's there, and we're willing to share that with others. We're also willing to partner with other organisations to assist them along that journey. The second key takeaway is that family selection and partnering over the long term is critical to success. This is why it's called progressive home ownership. It's not an individual transaction. It's a partnering, and Habitat loves that word. We love to partner and love to collaborate. And when we collaborate together, I think this is one of the things which is so exciting about this fund, is that we can actually take control of this problem and find solutions around our housing issues in New Zealand when we partner together. And then thirdly, as an organisation, you need to demonstrate that your organisation is actually, and the product is actually sustainable in the long term. So it is 15 years. It's not just a one-off thing that you might think, oh, I want to do this tomorrow, but then you're not interested in a week's time. You actually need to commit to this. It's a long-term piece. There's a 15-year horizon at least. And so that's why MHUD is so critical on doing due diligence around your organisation. But again, we're here to help. Habitat would like to help. So just the next slide, my contact details are there. If you'd like to contact me, you're welcome to do that. But of course, Habitat for Humanity has affiliates across New Zealand, and each of those affiliates, I can put you in contact with those people too, to talk to people who are local and on the ground in your local area. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mark.
Tēnā koe, Alan. Thank you for that comprehensive kōrero. Just got a couple of questions for you. For an organisation that's not established, what do you think is the most important aspect to have in place in order to meet the requirements of the ITP? Now, whānau, the ITP is the invitation to participate.
Yep, so thank you, Mark. I think probably the most important thing is actually to have a proven product. And once you've got that product, then the next thing is actually proving that your organisation is actually sustainable, has good governance, and is able to actually take that product and implement it. So there's probably two answers to that question.
Yep, kia ora. Kia ora, Alan. Hoi anō whānau, kua tai mātou ki te tātou, ki te mutunga o tēnei webinar. Hoi anō tēnei te mihi atu ki o koutou e whakarongo mai ana kia mātou I tēnei wā. That's it for us. I'll let you get back to this. Hopefully you'll have a beautiful day wherever you are in the country. We certainly have got it going on down here in Wellington. Hoi anō tātou. Ngā mihi nui ki o koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa.